Do you trust news media?
No, absolutely not.
Usually social media. I would prefer to go on to different apps, mostly black apps for us.
Do you trust news?
Nope.
To me, it's all tabloid now at this point.
The stories that they show, it's not stories of us. It's mostly, non-melanated people that I see. So if it could be more of us shown, then I would probably watch it more.
I'm Elizabeth Montgomery, and I'm a journalist. I define journalism as the community. It's a business, yes, it's part of corporations, but it's really the community. We're telling the community stories. I am born and raised in Atlanta. My dad actually was the journalist that I looked up to growing up. He worked at newsrooms all across Atlanta, and I grew up in those newsrooms. I was kicked out of my house at 18, and journalism was the one thing that I knew I could do. And I landed an internship at the Atlanta Voice newspaper, and I worked there while I lived in my car. I got paid $25 a week to transcribe interviews. I got to write a couple interviews too at the Atlanta Voice. That's a black newspaper. It's the black press of Atlanta. And working there really taught me that my community has a voice, the Atlanta Voice. And I really wanted to, it kind of instilled in me that the stories that need to be told are the stories that nobody really hears about. And so I learned early on that telling black stories is what I'm passionate about and what I wanted to do going forward. I didn't go in wanting to be the person to highlight the black community or highlight communities that are underrepresented. I went in just wanting to get a job in journalism and just be an awesome journalist. But once I saw that this was an issue, I was like, somebody has to write these stories because I'm meeting people, I'm networking out there, and they're amazing people doing amazing things, but they're not in the media, in the news. They say they care about diversity and they want the newsroom to reflect the community, and so they do things so that the newsroom can reflect the community, but they don't put the same support behind that. It's kind of like, yeah, let's agree to this, but we're not gonna actually help this happen. We're gonna hire a bunch of people and not pay them as they should be getting paid.
The Leavers survey, it was a survey of 101 respondents. The central hypothesis at the start of it was that journalists of color leave the industry at the mid-career point. So there's the narrative before this is that you just have to focus on training the journalists of color, and that's enough. They'll come in once they have access, that's sufficient. And what this survey shows is that that's actually not where the problem is. The problem actually may be the newsroom itself.
When newsrooms are white dominated, and there's not the diversity that reflects the community or that reflects the demographics or the future of this country even, it means that stories aren't told truthfully.
There was a position that was open and I went for it. I asked, hey, can I do this? I think I would be great as arts and culture reporter. This is what I'm passionate about. I love writing. We've seen in the past how my stories do, and it took a while, but eventually they moved me into that position. I couldn't pay my rent. I couldn't buy groceries at the same time. It was either rent or groceries. For that to be my life as a journalist who had been reporting for over a decade, who got into journalism in 2006, it was just mind-blowing to me that I don't even make enough to afford food at this point. Like, I'm not homeless, but I still can't eat. It opened my eyes a lot, because when that pay study came out and it showed that I make at least $25,000 less than a reporter who has less experience than me.
Going back to the Reagan years in the 1980s, through the Clinton years and the 1996 Telecom Act, which removed a lot of the limits on media ownership and the rules that were in place to ensure that local media was held in local hands.
As soon as we got the Reagan administration, we had an FCC chairman who argued that the television is just another appliance, a toaster with pictures. This led almost directly to media consolidation. We see in 1985, immediately after public interest regulations were rescinded, we had Cap Cities purchasing ABC, Murdoch purchases 20th Century Fox, heavy concentration of ownership in local television by a few large corporations eroded the quality of news that Americans received. This was predicted by Pew after extensive studies in 2003. It is no wonder that Black Americans and Latino Americans are going increasingly to social media to try to get information about what's going on in their community, what's happening with things that they care about in their lives. And you see that you have more and more people of color relying on social media. Black communities are repeatedly targeted online for disinformation. 70% of Black Americans use at least one social media site for daily information, a higher percentage than for whites. Recent social media campaigns have targeted Blacks to mislead Black communities about the COVID-19 vaccine, deterring Blacks from feeling safe about receiving it. There's a reason that Joe Biden came out and said that social media platforms like Facebook are killing people. They are particularly killing Black and brown Americans. What it was that Biden, I think, exaggerated was failing to account for the entire communications ecology, not just social media, but the impact that it has on the lack of local newspapers, the lack of local news, the lack of information, correct information that people could trust.
Indiscernible means that you are not seen, and Black people in Arizona have never been seen as migrants or refugees. And so we don't get the same empathy, the same support, the same considerations as other migrants or refugees. And certainly Black people were recruited in the 1930s to come to Arizona and do migrant work. And so they were migrants in that sense, but they were also refugees in the sense that lynchings were prolific. And I wrote to PBS and I wrote to NPR about the lack of Black reporters, because essentially what the broader media has done is they send white reporters out to collect Black stories and filter them for white consumption. And that is something that very much needs to change.
Wanda Tucker, I'll never forget that interview because I pulled over on the side of the road to cry because she went to Angola to basically retrace her ancestors' footsteps. They were some of the first slaves that were brought to America. And she lives in Phoenix. And USA Today was doing a big network-wide story about her. But her being in Phoenix, I was the one who was able to, talk to her and hear her story for a long time. What happened when she was in Angola and, what it's like being back in Phoenix. And I wrote about that conversation. That story ran on the front page of the Arizona Republic. I didn't feel valued at all. You're calling on me to write these stories. I'm writing a whole bunch of things that's not even part of my job. I'm making you look real good out here in the streets, but you don't value me enough to pay me what I deserve. You don't value me enough to pay me at least the same as someone with less experience than me. Why am I getting paid $25,000 less than someone who just got out of college?
So we started in late 2019, but we were really small and just kind of figuring it out. And then COVID hit and we closed our doors and weren't really sure how we were going to survive, how we were going to make it. Liz wrote a story about us and about us being the only Black-owned bookstore in Arizona, which I don't even think we realized at the time. The boost that we needed that carried us from then, which was May of 2020, all the way until now. It was, sometimes hundreds of orders a day. But none of that would have been possible without, one, like I said, Black women, but definitely Liz being an integral part in that story.
I got so much praise from the community, but my job was like, you're not a good writer. They put me on, almost wrote me up because they said I wasn't a good writer. In every meeting, it was gonna be a situation or where we talked about me in a negative way. It was just terrible. I don't even have the words still. And it was belittling, and it really turned me into a different person. It's like I've been through a lot in my life, but I've always wanted to live, and I've always wanted to, fulfill my purpose. But at that paper, it was just like, what is my purpose? They don't value me. They're underpaying me. I see it clear as day. Other people see it too. That entire 3 years that I spent was, personally, it was some of the worst experiences that I've had for my mental health and just self-esteem, really. It's very sad. Oh, it's very sad because this is what
In less than a year, roughly 31 journalists have left the Arizona Republic, and roughly 70% of those have been women or people of color. They would much rather cycle people of color in and out of the newsroom at bargain basement salaries and see how long they can keep them than to actually invest in keeping people of color.
Our information systems have facilitated, the emergence of maintenance of whiteness. As part of that economic growth and capitalism, they've profited, at an extreme rate from these systems and these relations of power. They play a functional role in the production and reproduction of capitalism. So these infrastructures are making bank. They getting rich. Some of these infrastructures, especially in this new technology, are producing white billionaires. So we understand that these infrastructures are not neutral. We recognize that media reparation, they're not only about recouping for past injury, they're also about transforming the current relations of extractive and exploitative power relations, if that makes sense. And they require some specific corrective actions, not just to correct the past, but to prevent the continuation of these practices in the future.
So now I moved on with a new job, and I'm excited, and I make double what I was making as a reporter. It's not in journalism right now, but it's what I need for my life to move forward. And I'm excited to move forward with that. And I hope to keep writing stories. As a writer, the recurring theme of my life is I'm gonna keep writing no matter what, and I'm gonna keep telling the stories of the community.